Hi, I'm Ann Delisi.
And I'm Chef James Rigato.
And in episode 14 of Essential Cooking, we're talking all about a kind of comfort food that is perfect for this time of year: soups, stocks, and broths. Not only are soups and broths delicious, they are also a great way to boost your immune system during our cold weather months. We have something very special in store for you too, an original recipe for aromatic sipping broth from my co-host, Chef James Rigato. I hope you'll find some inspiration to make your own stocks and broths and give Chef Rigato's sipping broth a try. 'Tis the season to eat warm things and drink warm things. And so I wanted to talk with you about making broths.
Right.
Because we can sip all day and be perfectly happy about it. This weekend's going to be a perfect time for that.
Yeah, right now, look outside.
Yeah, so we're ready for that. So I wanted to ask you a couple things. So if you're going to, like last year, okay, this is what I have to tell you. Last year, when the pandemic started shutting everything down, you were making this broth that I can't stop thinking about.
Yeah, the sipping broth.
It had the ginger and
we did ginger, lemongrass. Usually there's galangal, garlic. It's usually a chicken stock base, but we'll add, everything from, different seaweeds to charred vegetables. So, I try to make that's essentially a sipping broth with kind of a chicken stock base. But, this time of year, especially with the pandemic, I want to have immune boosting properties in the broths that you sip. And so if you really have a nice chicken stock or any kind of stock, if you're vegetarian, you can just do vegetable stock. But if you have a really nice stock, I like to just kind of enhance that into a sipping broth. And obviously you can make soups or risottos or whatever you want with it. But the sipping broth to me is kind of like it's like think of it like when you get like you go to drought and you get like the immune potion. It's kind of the same thing, but in a savory sense. Mm-hmm. So you want all the immune boosting properties of the savory ingredients. Like obviously you don't really put garlic in your orange juice, but simmered garlic with lemongrass and ginger and turmeric and cinnamon and all these different spices. They really they're great for your health. And also just sipping warm liquids like that. It's great for your respiratory system and just kind of meditative. So I totally agree. I think that was a good time, and I might go back to it. We might start selling more of it. It's been a pretty tame winter so far.
Yeah, it has.
But weather like this makes me think about broths too.
All right, so let's talk about the difference between making a stock and making a broth.
Right.
And I think that people get them confused, and they look at the boxes in the grocery store, and they look the same. And you can, of course, make these at home.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the difference, so we know what we're getting and what we're using them for, and the best way to go about it.
They're more or less of the same style. Stock is typically French and I would say less seasoned. So stock is like really bare bones. It's like if you buy chicken stock or vegetable stock, it's kind of like a little bit of vegetables and some chicken bones or just straight vegetables. Broth, I think, is where you start to see more salt added. So there's more sodium. If you're making a broth, typically you're going to add more meat scraps. I feel like broth people associate with almost like French onion soup or some of these like heartier pot roast kind of liquids. Right. So, but they don't have to be. If you think about like a miso broth, miso is so flavorful that water and miso, you're halfway. Yeah, you're halfway there. I mean, that's delicious. Now, if you add miso to a stock, you have a more rich product. But a broth is typically going to be in the mind. If you're going off the grocery store, like the shelf, you're probably going to see a thicker body and more sodium. If you're just going off of like what you see in the grocery store,
right.
If you're going off recipes you find online, broth is probably going to be a little more. Like I said, more meaty, But again, it doesn't have to. You can do a mushroom broth. But I think stocks should be kind of like under-seasoned so they can go in multiple directions. So if you put a stock in your freezer, you want to be able to make something, like a light, bright soup with it. You also want to be able to make like a pot roast with it. You can kind of go in any direction. If you're going to make like a beef broth, you can't, that's going to taste like beef. It's going to be rich. And, you can't really do a ton with it that doesn't involve the flavor of beef.
Right. All right. So let's talk about how to go about this. So you just made a chicken and you got the bones.
Right.
So we don't want that to go to waste. So this is the time to either throw it in the freezer, right, in a bag and use it later.
Yeah. So
what's the best way, I guess what I'm saying is, telling people how to repurpose this stuff in a way that doesn't take too much thought to it.
Absolutely. I definitely recommend the kind of like it can even be like just a plastic, 8-quart or like a container. It can just be like even like a, like a small pickle bucket or something in your deep freezer, your chest freezer, or Ziploc bags in your regular stand-up, refrigerator freezer. What I recommend you do is like any vegetable trim or mushroom stems or chicken bones or anything, even like if you're just cooking some lamb chops and the lamb bones, anything that you think, gosh, that looks like it has flavor. set that aside and put it in your freezer. And then when you go to make a stock, add those things to that stock. So like, for instance, like carrot peels, I don't save because it's kind of like just the dirt of the carrot, or onion skins. But if you chop up a bunch of onions, you're like, gosh, I'm only going to use half of these. Well, put them in a bag, put them in the freezer, and then save them for a stock. So when you go to actually make a stock, you have plentiful ingredients to give yourself a flavored broth. Because, if you make a really nice stock, you're like, oh my gosh, like I have, 8 quarts or 2 gallons of stock. Well, you can cook it down and freeze a condensed version, or you can, turn 4 quarts of it into a sipping broth, which will go very quickly, is much faster. I was selling that by the quart. And I easily could drink a quart a day. And there's only 4 quarts in a gallon. So you're talking about 4 days of sipping broth. It's not that much if you think about, making a couple gallons of stock. But I definitely recommend saving all your vegetables and your trim. Now, something like fish, you can do a fish broth. Fish broths aren't as delicious for sipping. But if you're gonna make like a chowder, or if you're gonna make a soup, I think if you're gonna make a like a potato soup and you're gonna add some chopped up shrimp and maybe a little bit of red curry to it, well then a fish stock is brilliant to have. So I would recommend making the fish stock with fresh bones and then freezing the stock. I wouldn't try to keep fish bones around as much. I will in the restaurant setting, but if I was at home and I'm getting crazy and I'm just breaking down a few fish, I would make a stock, even if it's a small amount, and then freeze the stock. Okay. Just because I feel like fish bones, like they'll just, they kind of get a little weird quickly. They'll deplete kind of, unless it's a really deep freeze. But you don't want to have your fish getting, kind of spoiled and then making a stock out of that.
Okay.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
So I want to talk about the cooking time.
Yeah. So it depends on the density of the bones, in my opinion, right? So you'll see, if you're getting big shank bones, you can talk about 24 hours. I think for beef stock, I like a 24-hour stock. Chicken stock, 12 to 24. And then I would also, kind of do my vegetables at different times. So maybe if I had a bunch of beef bones, I'm going to do a 12-hour stock with not much else in it besides beef, maybe mushroom stems. And then in the last half of it, I'm going to add the vegetables. And then in the final hour or two, I'll add some parsley stems and peppercorns or something else. But, if you're going to do a big stock at home, you can do it. And, Molly Mitchell brought up last time we were here, putting it in the oven, putting it in. So that's a good idea. Get what you don't have an open flame to deal with, or even a crock pot's a good one. Some people have sous vides, you can definitely, I've seen a lot of chefs doing like bagged, small broths in sous vide. But I think that, I personally put it on a low flame on the stove overnight, and I have no problem with it. It also perfumes your house incredibly.
Oh my God. Chris goes, I can't sleep.
Yeah, I know. It really is like
wakes you up.
It is.
It smells so good.
It's quite an aromatic experience.
Yeah.
Especially with the chicken stock. I feel like chicken stock is the most pleasant to walk into the home. Fish obviously smells like the ocean, and then beef can be pretty overpowering. But yeah, the chicken stock. And also, if let's say somebody's not making cooking whole chickens, or if you're just eating for one, there's a lot of quick tricks to make a delicious broth. So if you go to like the Asian market, there's something called handashi, which is like HAN and then dashi, DASHI. And dashi is kind of a broth famous in Japan. Usually it's like a little bit of bonito flakes, which is like dried fish, and seaweed. But then dashi it kind of means broth. You can go in a lot of different directions. But typically you'll always see seaweed and bonito in it. But handashi is kind of like a powdered dashi. And, typically you'll see that it has MSG in it, which is kind of a whole other show. For the record, I don't personally add MSG in my food, but I will eat it. I have no problem with it. Right. Certain ingredients like Hidden Valley Ranch contains MSG. We all love it. MSG is very, very misunderstood. So I'm not against MSG for the record, but I don't actually use it as a seasoning, but plenty of restaurants do.
Right.
So you can buy handashi. But warning, if you see MSG on the label, don't be scared. Use it anyways. And that gives you so much flavor. There's so many little tricks like that. Miso.
So when do you put that in?
I mean, that's like you literally can add handashi to water and it's ready. It's a broth.
So it's like
super flavorful broth. So if you're going to make like dumplings at home and you want a quick cheat, miso's a good one, but so's handashi. And then, if you take handashi, let's say a little bit of ginger, a little bit of, mushroom stems or dried mushrooms and a little fish sauce, you have a really delicious, flavorful broth. in a short amount of time. So something like handashi or even curry paste, like red curry paste, you kind of saute it in the pot and then add your broth or again, just water, and it's going to be super flavorful. So like, the knowing your way around the Asian market is going to give you so much flavor. But handashi and curry and fish sauce are like, if that's all you ever buy, I think you can really increase your flavors and your broths. You'd be amazed at what a little bit of, I had fish sauce, which is, it's a Vietnamese product. It's basically salted, typically it's anchovies or sardines or some kind of larger, not larger, but, like a whole fish salted and then, fermented and pressed. Sounds crazy, but it's delicious. Soy sauce, it's basically like the fish version of soy sauce. And you have so much flavor. I add it to like things like lobster bisque. I don't even tell anybody that I'm like, it doesn't make it like an Asian influenced lobster, but no, it could be a classic French lobster bisque, but a little bit of fish sauce just kind of ups the umami.
Ooh, that's nice.
So I think like, knowing your way around, just a few simple ingredients from the Asian market will go a long way. But fish sauce is one of those things that really enhances your broth.
Okay, so what are they again? Fish sauce?
I would say fish sauce, handashi, and then curry paste.
And curry paste.
Specifically, shelf stable, I think red curry paste is superior. We've talked about green curry in the past.
Yeah.
It's green is from the fresh herbs, so obviously fresh is best. But the red curry pastes, and I like to just like kind of caramelize them a little bit before adding your liquid. Just those simple things are just so good. Even make a Manhattan clam chowder and just add a tiny little bit of red curry paste. Just those super flavorful bombs that you don't even need to tell anybody you're doing. If you add a little splash of fish sauce to your
nobody would ever know.
Seafood chowder, no one's even going to know about it, but it's just so delicious.
Okay, so if you're making a vegetable broth, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Take your favorite things, or what's the best way? Should you saute them first, or?
It depends. You certainly can. Vegetable stocks, vegetable broths are always going to be a little bit lighter in flavor. So just keep that in mind. I think soy sauce, and dried mushrooms and seaweed are really necessary when it comes to vegetable, broths. I also use beer a lot. So I joke around that that's, vegetable stock because it's, fermented, grains. But I think that if you're going to do if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, I think seaweed and dried mushrooms are your best friends. They're going to give you a lot of flavor. They're going to darken your stock, so it'll be a darker color because they're like staining it. But kelp, is basically the best seaweed to actually kind of like truly, flavor. Kombu is obviously if you look at the Asian market, but that's going to give you like a really. If you let it sit in the stock for a long time, it's going to give it body. It's basically what agar comes from. So
it sounds so good.
It kind of creates like a gelatin. It almost gives you like that sticky kind of like mouthfeel that you get from like usually from
beef broth, right?
From animal bones.
Yeah.
But seaweed gives you that same effect too. So if you want like a nice kind of like rich, robust vegetable stock, you're going to need to go to seaweed.
That sounds really good. And if you want to add herbs to your stock or your broth or your sipping broth, that's at the end, or when's the best time to throw that stuff in?
So if you're talking like really fresh herbs, like if you want to add like cilantro or chives, I suggest you just add them to the broth and then consume them in the broth. But things like parsley stems, a little bit of thyme, that can kind of go in the last hour. Okay. And that's just going to give you a little bit of brightness. It's not, you're not going to taste, oh my gosh, this is parsley. Yeah. If you want, herbs are meant to be eaten raw and fresh typically.
Yeah.
So like add them raw and fresh.
And then you can freeze all this stuff and it's always sitting there for you.
Oh yeah,
broths, nice way to go.
Broth stocks, even if you're like making a little fish stock, making a little chicken stock, and then you want to make a gumbo where like all flavors are kind of welcome, you can kind of, do that then. Or even like, just a really spicy soup, something that you're not looking for a super delicate, like you can, if you were making a chorizo cabbage soup and you want to add a little, fish stock, no big deal. I don't think there's like hardcore rules when it comes to home cooking. Whatever's delicious and whatever you have, make that.
Now get a paper and pencil ready to write down Chef Rigato's original recipe for aromatic sipping broth. The ingredients are 1 to 2 gallons of chicken stock. You can make or buy this. There are many recipes out there for chicken stock. Chef Rigato likes using roasted bones and raw feet. A vegetable stock will work too if you're vegan or vegetarian. Combine equal parts lemongrass, ginger, and garlic. Start with 1 cup each. Add galangal if you can find it, 1 small bunch of parsley rinsed well, stems included, 6 bay leaves, 1 teaspoon black peppercorn, 2 cinnamon sticks, 6 clove, and 3-star anise. You'll want to toast these spices before adding them. Also add 2 tablespoons of ground turmeric, 1 teaspoon of ground cayenne. Simmer all of this on low for about 2 to 4 hours. Salt to taste. Chef Rigato likes his to be fully seasoned. strain through a fine mesh sieve, and add 2 lemons, zested and juiced. And here's an optional tip for a more soup-like feel. You can add a few tablespoons of miso after you strain the broth, or a few sheets of kombu about 20 to 30 minutes before you strain it. This stock will store about a week in the fridge, but you'll probably drink it way before then. I hope you'll try your hand at Chef James Rigato's recipe for aromatic sipping broth. You can find the recipe and tell us how it tasted at wdet.org/essential cooking. Thank you so much for listening, and
we would like to thank La Marca Prosecco for their support. From the hills of Veneto, Italy, you can never go wrong with Prosecco, whether it's in a spritz or drinking straight.
Joan Isabella is our executive producer. Assistant producers are David Lyons and Lisa Brancato. This episode was edited by Rowan Nemisto with production support provided by Studios on the Pond. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. This is a production of Detroit's public radio station, WDET.